Alright, welcome to the DLC preparation checklist. This is everything I think you should do before the DLC comes out for Elden Ring, but also the things that Elden Ring is going to require you to do before you even have access to Shadow of the Erdtree. So, sit back, relax, leave down in the comments some things that you guys are doing to prep for the DLC, because I absolutely can't wait, so let's get into it. So there's going to be a few things that the game tells you have to do in order to even be able to access the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. Number one, and probably the most important because without this you can't get to number two, is you need to have beaten Radahn. We don't know why this is important lore-wise, but overall that is the main thing we're being told to do, is beat Radahn so then you can get to step number two, which is get to Mohg, Lord of Blood, and defeat him as well. This could potentially have something to do with Radahn holding back the stars, and we're not able to even get to the Land of Shadow before he is dead, but after you defeat him, then you'll be able to access Mohg, Lord of Blood. To get there, you are going to have two separate options. Option number one, you can follow Varus's questline, which will get you there sooner, but I wouldn't recommend doing that, and I'm going to explain that a little bit later in the video. But option number two is going up to the consecrated snowfields and taking the portal directly to Mohgwyn's Sacred Palace, and I recommend you do this because you are going to get there later in the game. From everything that we have heard from Shadow of the Erdtree news, the difficulty of this DLC is going to rival that of the Haligtree, Fair Missoula, and other in-game areas within Elden Ring. The DLCs of every single FromSoft game have always been very difficult, so this just makes sense that it's going to be around the same difficulty as the bosses and enemies you fight in those areas. Mohg is also going to be a great gauge of your build when it comes to DLC content. If you can beat Mohg with ease, your build is probably good to go, and you should be able to head right into the DLC. Now, why do we even need to beat Mohg, Lord of Blood? Well, everything that we have seen so far has told us that in order to access the Shadow of the Erdtree, we need to touch Miquella's hand that's falling out of the cocoon within Mohg's boss arena. So once you defeat him, you will have full access to grab the hand and head into the DLC. Now, earlier in the video, I mentioned that you may not want to do Varus's questline to get into the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. So let me explain my thought process behind that, and you can let me know down in the comments if you agree or if you disagree. So my reasoning is this. If Varus's questline to get into Mohgwyn's Sacred Palace is only going to take you to Liurnia of the Lakes, that's not even halfway through the game. Now, if you are on a new character or a fresh character, you aren't going to have certain items unlocked, you're not going to have certain access to levels for your weapons, and you also are not going to have as many talisman slots as you typically would if you access the portal located within the consecrated snowfields. Now, that being said, if you are on New Game or New Game Plus like I am, overall that's not going to matter for you because you have already had access to everything you had prior in the regular game. Now, there is one more thing I want to mention before we get into what you actually should be doing in order to prep yourself for Shadow of the Erdtree. I mentioned testing your build against Mohg in order to gauge whether you're ready for the Shadow of the Erdtree, and although that is accurate and true, there is a whole new leveling system within Shadow of the Erdtree that we are unsure how it's going to affect all the builds moving forward. Now, although I do think it's a really good idea for you to go in with a great build that you're comfortable with and doing a lot of damage, it could change up the second we get into Shadow of the Erdtree and we could be back at the equivalent of level 1, we just don't know. But with that being said, I do recommend you get a solid build. If you need any ideas for builds, I have a ton of builds on my channel, so definitely go check those out. So what am I doing in order to prep for the actual DLC? How am I going through the lands between and getting what I need so I am prepared? The first thing I'm doing is I am gathering a ton of smithing stones. I am rune farming. I'm spending a ton of runes on smithing stones and Round Table Hold because I don't think they're going to put a new weapon leveling system in Shadow of the Erdtree, so I am assuming that smithing stones and Ancient Dragon smithing stones are going to be used to level those weapons, which is why I am gathering so many. With 8 new weapon types coming in Shadow of the Erdtree, there's going to be a ton of different weapons within those weapon types that we are going to need to level up, test out, and try in Shadow of the Erdtree, so this is the reason that I am stockpiling smithing stones like crazy. Now, if you don't have access to all the bell bearings within Round Table Hold to buy all the smithing stones you need, then I'm going to go ahead and leave on the screen right now so you can pause it all the areas where the bell bearings are going to be located and which smithing stones they unlock. There are 4 bell bearings for regular smithing stones, and there's 5 bell bearings for somber silver smithing stones. Now, if you are on your first playthrough and trying to access Shadow of the Erdtree, this just further reinstates the idea that you should go into Mohgwyn's Sacred Palace through the Consecrated Snowfields portal. This is going to allow you to access pretty much every single bell bearing within the game, so you'll be able to have your weapon leveled up as high as it can possibly go. Now, speaking of gathering things in the lands between, you want to go through and make sure you have all of the cookbooks so you can craft all the items that you could potentially need within Shadow of the Erdtree. Going in overprepared is a lot better than going in and finding out you were unprepared, so snag all of those cookbooks as well as all the Flask of Wondrous Physic Crystal Tears. They are scattered all over the lands between. I have videos on my channel if you want to go check those out if you need to find some for yourself. Another item that you're definitely going to need is wet blades. These items are going to allow you to put different affinities as well as ashes of war on your weapon, so they are incredibly important to have. The whetstone knife is going to be found at the Gatefront Ruins. The iron wet blade is going to be found in Stormvale Castle. The glintstone wet blade is going to be found in Raya Lucaria Academy. The red hot wet blade is going to be found in Redmane Castle. The sanctified wet blade is going to be found in the fortified Manor Lindell, and the black wet blade is going to be found in Nokron, the Eternal City. Gathering all these wet blades is going to allow you to put every single affinity onto your weapon, allowing you to have the most advantage going into the DLC with your weapon. There are two more items that I feel you should stockpile, and the first one is going to be stone sword keys. I'm not 100% sure if these are going to be used in the DLC. I can imagine, considering they've been the massive way to get into certain dungeons and areas in the base game, that this will follow suit in the Shadow of the Erdtree, so make sure that you are visiting merchants, exploring the lands between, and grabbing all of these that you can, so you'll be able to get access to the areas in the Shadow of the Erdtree that may be locked behind stone sword keys. And the last item I suggest you stockpile up on are Larval Tears. These are used to respec at Rennala within Raya Lucaria, and I imagine with all the new weapons and weapon types coming in Shadow of the Erdtree that people are going to want to try each one of them out, but you can't really use a dex bleed weapon if all you're using is strength. So having the ability to respec, to try out different weapons and different builds going into the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC is definitely something you want to do, and I do have a video that tells you where to find every single Larval Tear, so I will leave that down in the video description below so you guys can go find them. And the very last thing that I am going to be doing, and I feel like you should be doing, is cleaning out your inventory. I know a ton of us are hoarders of every single item, weapon, piece of armor, everything we can get in Elden Ring. We hold it in our inventory like precious treasure. But here's the deal. You don't need 6 different types of that same weapon. You don't need 5 of those pants that go to the same armor set. Go through, blitz your inventory, get everything cleaned up, because when new items come in Shadow of the Erdtree, you're going to want to be able to find them quickly, and it's just a very small quality of life change that I think a lot of us can make in order to fully be prepped for Shadow of the Erdtree. And that's going to be my list of everything that I think you should do to prep for Shadow of the Erdtree in Elden Ring. I'm super excited for June. I cannot wait for it to get here, and I'm going to be working on prepping all of this stuff as everything gets closer. If you want to come prep with me, I do stream Tuesday nights at 7:30. We're going through a ton of DLC prep currently, so I'm really excited to be doing that, and I can't wait to see you guys there. So with that being said, leave down in the comments things that you are doing to prep for the DLC, hit that sub button on your way out, and until next time, stay safe, enjoy the game, and I'll see you in the next one.